Disclaimer, this video goes to some rather dark places for my content personally, but this is a video I've been wanting to make for quite some time and just haven't really felt like I needed to make it until here recently when certain current world events happened that made me get to start thinking, and I was like, you know what, I think I should probably make a video like this to sort of boost some bit of positivity, because frankly I think that we need positivity in this current day and age. But do note this video goes to some rather dark places, and it isn't the type of content I normally make. This is not a review of Devil May Cry 5, it is not gameplay highlights from Devil May Cry 5, this is a video talking about certain personal events that happened in my life that happened to relate in some way to Devil May Cry 5 or been caused by Devil May Cry 5. So I do hope that if any of you stick around that you do enjoy what I'm about to do and sort of get a feel for it. He said, I know all the lies that you hide behind every fake smile. Am I gonna be lonely like you for all my life? Ozzy Osbourne. So to start this video off, I would like it if you could sort of rewind things back to mid 2018, because that is when really, in my opinion, this tale of mine sort of begins, because it was when I started to get really introspective about a lot of things in my life personally. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I will list off some of the things that were happening. So if you look at where I was at this time, because I was not in a good headspace, I was about to approach my senior year, and I was a little worried because I didn't have a plan for how things should go. I didn't know what I was doing, and I basically did not have my life figured out. Couple that with the fact that 90% of my friends graduated the year prior, so I was going into this with less than a handful of my friends, because most of us no longer talked as we no longer went to school together, so most of us didn't really see a reason to hang out anymore, which is understandable. But it got to the point where I was dreading this year so much because of that fact, I straight up bought headphones that way I didn't constantly feel alone. Now, if you look at the start of the school year, if I was to label what my senior year of high school was, it was essentially me going from in summer, just, okay, this year isn't going to be the best year of all time, but, you know, I'll still enjoy it, to, oh, sweet God, it gets worse. I say that, but it got to the point where at some point during that semester, I could only really find joy in school, as things at home weren't great for me because of the headspace I was in. I didn't have my life figured out, and I began to feel really, really useless and like I was a burden to everyone. But at school, I was a pretty good A-B student. I did have a handful of friends. And then 2019 came along, and where things were originally, you know, not perfect, but I could still find some semblance of joy, 2019 basically came in and shot whatever joy I had in the face. Because now I was no longer working with classes that I was decently proficient in. Except for Spanish. I was always a rather terrible Spanish student. But now I had more stuff similar to chemistry, Spanish, technology, and I believe culinary arts, which was a subject I actually did rather well in. Now, one piece of information that I have been withholding is, at this point, I had already started working a fast food job, and I will not name the establishment I worked at out of fear of them spitting in my food still, because I'm convinced if I ever go back there they will, so I tend to avoid this restaurant as much as possible. But prior to that summer, I had experienced what it was like to, you know, have a decent job that sort of cared about your well-being. That being a sign spinner, because the place I worked was constantly, like, if it was raining or the weather conditions weren't looking so hot, they would tell me, hey, come inside, we're not going to dock your pay. Now, this fast food establishment, however, did not care about me in the slightest. They were like, oh yeah, I know that it's, pouring the friggin' rain, but I need you to go sweep the parking lot. I know it's super windy, but I need you to take out these empty cardboard boxes all at once, and I don't want you constantly opening the door, so you're going to have to stack them all outside at one singular time and sort of get through there. Plus, on top of this, I wasn't getting a break at that job at the time. They were manipulating my schedule to a point where they, by law, were not required to give me any breaks because of the amount of hours they worked me. They worked me one less than the required number to give someone a break. And now is when we actually get into the area of 2019. At this point, I was getting rather depressed due to just the situation of everything, and couple that with the fact that I realized how bad it was that I didn't have my life together, even though it appeared as such that I had my life completely figured out, but I didn't. Now, I was using games at this point as a form of escapism, which was really unhealthy for me personally, because I needed to deal with these issues, not, run away, duck, and hide from them for as long as possible. But I was using Kingdom Hearts 3 as my current escapism at this time, and it got to a weird point where I thought I had finally hit the age where video games just aren't a lot of fun anymore, like, especially stuff like Kingdom Hearts, which was a video game series that I myself really, really enjoyed. But it got to a point with Kingdom Hearts 3 where I was like, I didn't really enjoy it at all. It was just okay, and I got really sad because I was like, hey, this is the one hobby that just makes me feel like me, and it's now gotten to a point where I no longer derive joy from this hobby. So, naturally, I had quite a lot riding on the release of Devil May Cry 5. It was the one game of the year that I was really hyped for, really looking forward to, because, in my opinion, this was my game. This was, like, the one thing that I've been wanting since freshman year, because that's when I discovered the Devil May Cry series. And I also sort of made an agreement with myself of, if I don't find joy from this, I'm still going to try to play a few video games and see if I still enjoy them, but ultimately I would never buy a game at launch ever again. I would just kind of slowly walk away from gaming if I didn't find any kind of joy in this. And then finally came like the 3 weeks of release, which were 3 weeks that were incredibly hard on me as a person because my grandmother had just passed away, so things were not in the best headspace, and I was on thin ice at work because the night she passed, I left my shift really early, and I was one of the only 2 people in the store, so they had to get someone in as soon as possible, which they were not going to give me this day off, despite the fact that I had requested it all the way back in December, which I was like, I understand why you're not giving me it off, but at the same time, I had asked for this at least a month in advance. And now is when we finally get to that faithful day of the release of Devil May Cry 5. Now, as I had established, this was a day I was planning to go into work and essentially pull an all-night gaming session once I got off just playing DMC5, or at least falling asleep till the game downloaded or something like that. But for some reason, I knew like the next day I was going to be busy. I forget what the exact circumstances were, but my plan was, like, that night I was going to basically pull an all-night gaming sesh and go from there. Come 5 a.m. on the morning of the release of Devil May Cry 5, my father woke me up as he normally did, with his loud singing, and of course, once he saw us, and once I got out of bed and my sister got to her door, our dad said to us what he does every single morning, which is essentially Carpe Diem, or Seize the Day. Now, what makes it very special about this morning is he was really angry because my sister was working the night before, and apparently they said something to him that was, in his opinion, the last straw, as neither me or my sister had our license at the time, so he had to drive us to and from work, and he was not a big fan of us constantly working till the store closed, for no apparent reason other than they could. Anyway, I was then tasked with calling up our local restaurant and explaining that yes, we were going to be quitting our jobs and would not work for them after today, because frankly we had had enough of this. Personally, this was a major relief off my back because now I could actually focus on studying rather than, the proper way to make a singular hamburger that, if I got it wrong, would then get shoved in my face and told that I was a failure of a fry cook. Skip ahead a few hours to 7 a.m. in the day, where I then proceeded to ask my chemistry teacher, how I was doing in class, as I only had, a few more weeks until all the senior stuff really started to kick in, and I would not really have a lot of time to focus on that class in particular. She told me that, yes, I was passing barely so. This came as a giant heap of good news to me personally, as I was under the impression I was failing the class miserably. I found out I was barely passing, but once again, I was still passing. Cut to my technology class later that day, and I was finally wrapping up a big project that I had been working on for several months at this point. I believe I was working on a RAM of some kind, but I had finally finished the model and could move on to printing. However, because hindsight is always 20/20, I never actually got around to printing the project. What ended up happening was every day after that, there were so many people on the 3D printers because we didn't have enough for everyone in the class to be working on different projects, as well as some people would stay over because their projects were a lot bigger, therefore requiring much more time to print. I was never really given the go-ahead to print it, as it was a relatively small project, but a project nonetheless. Now, if we cut to lunch of that day, because I don't know how early in the day it was released, but I saw a trailer for Devil May Cry published at lunch, because that's when my friend and I actually downloaded a VPN to watch YouTube on school websites, which was honestly the bomb sauce, and I still hold to this day, you don't need to block YouTube on school computers. There, I said it. But the fact was, this time I could actually watch the new trailer for a Devil May Cry game, where it was like the launch day trailer that revealed it had Virgil. And that just made me really happy because it was a really awesome trailer. And this was going to be a game I was playing that day, and I was super excited for it. Okay, so fast forward to about 4:20 in the afternoon, and I was finally getting home, jamming out to a song known as Music for Sad People, which, if you know, and it's a really good song, and you should go and give it a listen, after this video. Point is, when I finally, walked into my house and went to the kitchen to make me something to eat until my father got home, I realized that my dad was actually home, and he was waiting for us. You see, every Friday my father did this really cool thing where he bought us all pizza, which he still does to this day, and it is amazing. But on this day in particular, he brought some Girl Scout cookies home for all of us, which means we all got a whole box of these little Girl Scout Thin Mint cookies, and they were just on point, beautiful. Couple that with the fact that I was getting a whole 3-meat pizza to myself that day, this was already panning out to be a really good afternoon for some reason, because at this point I was starting to get really suspicious with how good my day had been. So to give you context for how most of my days have gone up to this point, there would always be something really bad or slightly bad happen anytime something good happened. It was quite literally the law of equivalent exchange of my life. Point is, when I got Devil May Cry 5 put into the system, ate dinner, then came back up to my room, it had downloaded fully quickly and even got the whole day 1 patch done, which surprised me. But here's the real kicker to all that. The game was not bad. It was not even okay. It was not even good. It was, in my opinion, and still is, the greatest video game ever made. Just everything about it is perfect to me. Personally, I have never really felt like someone made a game solely for me and my personal tastes, but Devil May Cry is essentially, in my opinion, what a game would be like if it was made for solely me and me alone, because it was just that good. It was like right up my alley, and everything about it was perfect. And I still hold these feelings even till today. Like, I've had people put well-placed arguments on, I mean, it's good, but it's not the perfect game. And I will always rebuttal with, correction, it's actually perfect in every way. And I have actually gotten into full-blown arguments with certain people about this game being the greatest video game ever coded. But luckily for me, though, personally, just the love I have for this game doesn't merely end there. It actually goes much better than a bunch of small things adding up to probably the greatest game of my life. It actually taught me certain things that I think I personally needed to hear at the time, and I'll go over those in a different section of this video, but for the first section, I'd like to have the moral sort of stand of sometimes it's the small things that add up that just make everything better. Because in my opinion, this was probably the turning point of my senior year where things went from god-awful and terrible to actually fairly good. So, appreciate the little things in life, because sometimes all it takes is not so much one big thing going right as a bunch of smaller things adding up that just make everything better. You see, my friend has this character in which he relates to. He's a completely useless and absolutely garbage character named Roxas. Now, for instance, to put this in DMC terms, the closest thing I have to said garbage character would probably end up being V. And I relate to the struggle he kind of goes through in DMC5, a bit closer towards the end because it speaks a lot more towards me as a person, while I've never had to, say, fight my demon half in a vigorous battle to the death. I have, at the time, I felt like I was falling apart, that I had lost almost all hope of ever being useful, and that my life was going to fall apart after I graduated. So I related a lot more to V than any other character at the time, because of V's storyline about falling apart, because I mentally felt like I was in that kind of place. To sort of show you, like, how much I enjoyed V's character in this, not only does he have my favorite scene in pretty much all of gaming at this point, but he also made me start looking a bit more into poetry, as I actually wrote some really, really terrible poetry my senior year. And no, I'm not going to read it to you. Heck, even Solzenos, my best friend, doesn't know how much poetry I actually wrote my senior year, because I have literally buried that stuff, like, in docs upon Google Docs upon Google Docs. But the point is, V had such a profound effect on me that he made me start looking more into poetry and the meaning behind certain phrases, which I still think is kind of weird personally. Another character I started to relate to, and this was kind of a while after I had beaten the game and actually put it down, was Virgil, ironically, because used to be Virgil was not really my favorite, like, antagonist in all of gaming, but he was up there. But now after the release of DMC5, of course, he has gone from one of my favorites to my absolute favorite of just all villains. The main reason I like Devil May Cry 5 as much as I do, though, it has more to do with the unintentional message I ended up slightly gleaming from it, which I don't believe it was intentional, but all the same, I am happy that I sort of derived some kind of meaning from it, considering how many hours that I have sunk into this game, just because I love it so much. But one thing I ended up taking away from DMC5 after I was finished with the story was I ended up taking away the fact that it's never too late to turn things around. No matter how bad things are, you can always shift it in your favor. You can always turn it around. Doesn't matter what it is, how bad the situation looks, you can always turn things around in your favor. To sort of bring you into the modern day, I figure I better end this video with that, as my life has improved substantially from where it was. But that mainly has to do with the fact that I put my nose to the grindstone and fixed my problems instead of pretending that they weren't there or ignoring them. Now, I am aware that this video probably seems extremely stupid and childish, and to be fair, you are kind of right, but it's also a story about how video games kind of taught me to appreciate the little things, so of course the subject matter itself is a little stupid, but it's something deeply personal to me, and I want to spread some positivity considering what's going on in the current day and age. So, to spread some positivity, even if, no one else felt some positivities, here are a bunch of pictures of my dog. Oh yeah, and follow me on Twitter at James_Vito. Thanks.